The story you're about to hear was told to me in the strictest of confidence. Certain names, dates and locations have been changed to protect that confidence. Events that feature in this story may be part of the public record. If you believe you recognise any of the people, places or events that appear in this story, I ask you not to reveal any information publicly, out of respect for the subject's right to remain anonymous. My name is David Paul Nixon, and this is the New Ghost Stories podcast, where we delve into the New Ghost Stories archive to hear new and classic cases of the supernatural. Stories that could be delusions, lies, fantasies, or perhaps even the real thing. Just don't make your mind up until you've listened. It's harder to be a good person than a bad one. To be the sort of person who cares, to be a kind person, someone who thinks fairness is important, who takes the time to stop and help when they see someone who's in need. It takes less effort to be cruel, to tell lies, to care only about yourself and not give a damn about anyone else. And yet we seem to value it the other way around. It's the decent, caring people who are seen as weak, as do-gooders and bleeding hearts. It's the bastards, the thugs, the lying sons of bitches who are seen as strong. Because if you can throw your weight around and shout and bully, then you don't have to do the hard work. You don't have to go through messy things like trying to understand, being patient, being empathetic. You don't have to try to get to grips with things that are complex. You don't have to give anything up, like your time or your money. We are supposed to aspire to goodness, generosity, fair play, humility, grace. We talk as though we admire the virtuous, and yet all the attention and all the conversation is taken up by the transgressors, the outraged peddlers, the people who insult and troll and who just don't give a fuck. Why do we pay such attention to those who do the wrong thing shamelessly, proudly? Why do such people become subjects of praise and envy? It's because we know that following the rules can be tough, that social conventions can be a burden. They can hold us back, stop us expressing ourselves and giving in to our impulses. And a part of us wants that freedom, to lash out when provoked, to tell others what we really think of them, to make other people do what we tell them, and punish them if they fail. It seems so appealing because it allows us to become unleashed, our reactionary desires to be fulfilled, to get all the things we want. At least we think it will. We know that such transgressions actually come with consequences, that they would hurt others, make things worse for everyone, including ourselves. Yet we desire it anyway. Society seems to be enamoured of those who can get away with it, even though behind them is a string of people forced to pick up after them, who suffer in their wake. If it was easy to be good, we'd all be doing it. But we must never give in, we must never give up, we must do the hard work, whether we get the credit or not. Because we know that things would get worse. The world can't be a better place without good people. If there aren't good people out there, everything starts to slide. When people stop caring, nothing we share gets to be good, and unless you're so rich that you can build yourself an island, we cannot avoid sharing our spaces with others who we inevitably have to depend on in ways big and small. If we let the bastards change who we are, then we really are screwed. Sometimes to be good means gritting your teeth, having skin as thick as leather, to be willing to give it your all without any rewards, and to still feel good about it afterwards. That's the kind of strength the bullies, the demagogues, the trolls, and the opinion columnists can never understand. This is New Ghost Stories case number 396. It's called What We Leave Behind, and you can hear it in full, uninterrupted, after these messages. Just a note to say that the narrator of this story is female. Dust is supposed to be made up of dead people's skin, said Rachel, running her finger across the dusty window ledge, drawing a thick line through it. I wonder what percentage of your mum I have on my finger right now. She held it up to the light. Rachel has a habit of thinking out loud and saying the most inappropriate things, and somehow always getting away with it. Are you touching up my dead mother? I said dryly, sitting at the kitchen table. She smiled, then blew the dust from her fingertip in my direction. I flinched, even though there was almost nothing there. We could hear more thumping from upstairs. How much longer do you think she's going to be searching? She asked me. She's searched Mum's room and my old room, I said. She's in the spare bedroom now. There's nowhere else left, unless she wants to go and do every room again. Something crashed to the floor above us. We looked up to the ceiling. The noise sounded aggressive. A moment later, we heard her coming down the stairs. I looked over at Rachel. She stopped leaning against the cooker, and I sat up straight. This could be it, the moment she finally gave up. Lillian stood in the kitchen doorway, ruffled, slightly out of breath. She stared at me, annoyed, but I spoke first. No luck then. She shook her head. You are sure you haven't seen it anywhere? I've looked everywhere, same as you. It hasn't fallen into any of the bags of clothing. I double-checked all the pockets, all the handbags, and all the shoe boxes. I can't find it anywhere. We'd been through this already. She puffed air through her teeth and shook her head. Once again, she said, She promised me that ring. Every time she said it, it got just a little bit more theatrical. I'll ask the people at the charity shop to let me know if they find any jewellery. It's a valuable ring, an heirloom. It's priceless. It wasn't priceless. She definitely knew how much it was worth. I don't know what to tell you. It's not here. We should probably call the police. I don't think the nurse took it. You don't know that she didn't. I don't have any reason to think that she did. She's been very good with helping me to get things together. That doesn't mean she didn't take it. I felt like if I argued with her, she'd end up even more determined to try and go after her, so I kept quiet and hoped she'd give up. She took a moment to think, then asked if I had a cigarette. I chose not to be offended at her assumption that I'd gone back on the wagon and reached for my pack of sovereigns. Join me for one? She said. I got up and pulled my coat off the back of the chair. This was Lillian requesting to have a private conference, so we could talk without her having to ask Rachel to leave the room. Got to keep important matters within the family. Can't go talking loosely in front of any old person, especially not one of these blue-haired lesbians. It wasn't that Lillian was homophobic. It was just that if you weren't settled down with a husband, you weren't taking life seriously enough. It was a grey, miserable day in November, a week after the clocks had gone back. Lillian was a tense smoker despite her I'm a businesswoman, take me seriously vibes. She looked like she was bracing for a colonoscopy. I suppose this is it, she said. Probably won't ever see the old house again. She took another drag. Feels like it ought to be momentous or something. No, it's just a house, I said. I shan't be sorry to see the back of it. Really? You won't have anywhere to fall back on when it's gone? You think things are going to fall apart for me? No, that's not what I'm saying. God, you're so easily offended. She had another drag. You've just had false starts in the past, that's all. I left her comments hanging. She broke the silence by asking, How long have you been seeing Rachel now? 2 years, I said. She has this fucking way of talking like anything that's going on with your life isn't important enough to remember. I was dying for her to leave. Shame we can't do the place up first before we put it on the market. If you want to invest the money, I said. Stephen doesn't think it's worth it, the way the market is around here. He doesn't think we'd get a decent return on the money and the time we'd have to put in. Mum should have sold it. She didn't need all this space. Well, Dad didn't leave her with much else, so she kind of wanted to keep it. protect whatever good memories she had left of all their years together. I could have said that, but Lillian doesn't like talking about Dad much, at least not in a way that faces the facts. Successful businessman is the phrase she liked to use when describing him. It's not the phrase that was used in court. When are the charity people coming over? Tomorrow for the clothes and bric-a-brac, I said. Thursday for the furniture, except for a few pieces so I've got something to sit and sleep on. Thanks for doing this. Me and Stephen really appreciate it. I made no remark. She knew I needed the money more. When it came to Mum, she always let me pick up the work. She always found a way. Her life and her work was always so much more important. It's ironic, really. In her mind, the story she told herself, because Lillian is all made up of stories, personal branding is her thing, is that I'm the screw-up, the layabout who doesn't do work, not proper work. But she never had a problem leaving me to sort out anything that she didn't want to. She always got what she wanted in the end. At least most of the time. I can't believe she lost that ring, she said. I can't believe you didn't look after it. I'm not having this argument again, I said. I didn't know she hadn't put it somewhere safe, and I spent hours on top of everything else looking for it, just like you did. Lillian didn't respond. She clenched up and took another drag. I went back inside and she soon followed. I counted the seconds while she made polite pre-leaving small talk, took one last look at the place, and said some performative words about it being the end of an era. And then finally, fucking left. We never really got on. She's Dad's daughter. She believed in all the bullshit, all his myth-making and lies. And even when he was exposed as a fraud, investing money from one business and putting it into another to pay off his debts, she stayed a true believer. Because by then she was too defined by it. The pro-business, pro-entrepreneur, pro-hustle crap, being one of those high-productivity, push the envelope, go big, go home, out of your comfort zone talking twats, to care about the truth and what it might say about her. And while she was doing big, important, motivational business things, I was here making sure Mum was comfortable in bed. I was here making sure she had her painkillers and helping her to go to the toilet and get in and out of the shower. And I was cooking for her and making her eat when she didn't want to eat and making her drink so she wouldn't get dehydrated. I tried to help her remember what was going on when she got confused and when she started to freak out, and comforted her those times when she was only too aware that she was dying and didn't have much time left, and that her remaining time was only going to be more full of pain and misery and endless mind-fucking tedium. My sister couldn't handle that. God, it's depressing here, she said on one of her visits, like I didn't know. I just have so much going on right now. I really appreciate you being here, she'd say. Anything was more important than being here with her mum in her final dying days. She only paid for the nurse because I was going on at her, because I couldn't cope with doing it entirely on my own. She doesn't put any value on kindness or humanity. Not important enough in her quest to try and claw her way up to the top of whatever the fuck it was she was trying to claw her way up to the top of. And after leaving me to do almost everything, she had the nerve to claim she had a right to Mum's emerald engagement ring, the most valuable thing she owned, the only really valuable thing she had left. She claimed Mum had promised it to her, probably when we were kids and probably just offhand without even thinking about it. And it'll be yours one day, offhand kind of thing. That's a solid cast iron promise in Lillian's book. I don't remember it happening. I don't think anyone else knew anything about it, but she managed to find a way to bring it up in Mum's last few weeks of being alive, and Mum didn't have the strength to disagree with her. Lillian always finds a way to get what she wants. But not this time. Me and Rachel looked through the living room window from behind the kitchen door. We watched as a car pulled out and we gave it a few minutes after that just to make sure. Rachel walked over to the washing machine. She pulled out the detergent tray, and from inside she lifted out a matchbox. She walked over to me and I held out my hands. She pushed the end and the little tray came out. She turned it over and out fell a small, ornate emerald ring, set in tarnished silver. The nurse had found it a few days after Mum died. I held it up to the light just to see it sparkle. I placed it on my finger and I admired it. You're not getting your fucking way this time, Lillian, I thought. I looked after Mum. I did it when you wouldn't. You don't deserve this, and you're not getting this. It belongs to me. True, it was an old and cool design, pre-roaring 20s, and it hadn't really come back into fashion. I couldn't really wear it out anywhere, not unless I was really dressed up. But it was valuable, and I was keeping it just because I wanted to, and I had as much right to it as anyone. Are you trembling? Rachel asked. I feel nervous, I said, hating myself for it. If she ever finds out. It's not like we move in the same social circles, Rachel said, sliding her arms around my waist from behind, putting her cheek against mine. She wouldn't ever be seen with the likes of us. It's hard to suppress childish feelings. Was I even stealing it? I was lying, but Lillian had been pretty fucking forgiving about that in the past. Don't feel guilty, said Rachel. She works for stockbrokers and banks, for fuck's sake. Fuck her. This one's for you. I knew I was right, so what did it matter what I was feeling? Mum died after a brave fight against an aggressive form of breast cancer. She went through surgery knowing the chances of success were low, and she died in her bed at home with just one of her daughters by her side. Lillian arrived too late, busy at some conference or other. The house meant everything to Mum. She wanted to die there, not in some hospice. I think why the house meant so much to her was because it was something to hang on to. She could feel safe by thinking of the times when the lies worked, when she had her husband and 2 loving daughters and everything seemed fine. She could pretend not to know she'd married a liar and a crook, and could pretend he was a good husband and father and not sleeping with anyone else or stealing anyone else's money, and that she had 2 young daughters with so much potential, not one aimless screw-up and another who learned all the wrong lessons and redefined lies as fake it till you make it self-actualization. Sadly, lies work. Lillian is self-actualized and successful. Her and her automaton husband go around the country, across the Atlantic, giving motivational lectures and productivity courses and all that horse shit. And Mum did take some comfort from nostalgia for the better days. I had to sit by and watch her go through old photos and hold my nose when she talked about how they met and how he courted her, or how they went to Corsica on their honeymoon, and all about the family holidays to Cornwall and Euro Disney. She didn't talk much about the first time he got her to lend him money, of course, or the first time she suspected him of sleeping with someone else on the side. Bullshit still smells sweeter than the truth. This was the last time I was ever going to spend at my mum's, the house I grew up in. I was going to spend it getting rid of the last pieces of her, all the things she'd left behind, her unliving remains, books, shelves, pictures, chairs, clothes, and so on. The accumulated mass of her existence to be divvied out until there was nothing left. The mission was to leave no sign that she'd ever lived here, or even existed. One of Rachel's ideas for cheering us up was to do a final tour of the neighbourhood's finest takeaways, all the local greatest food hits. It was a tandoori that night. We sat scoffing marinated meats on the remaining sofa cushions. We dragged the sofa itself out onto the curb for the council to collect. It was too knackered to give away. Rachel was due back at work the next morning, so I'd be continuing on alone. She was worried about me being there on my own. I'm going to be fine, I told her. She's always fussing over me. I really can't wait to see the back of this place. I just want it gone, to cut the past off with a knife and never have to drag it around with me anymore. You must have some good memories of your life here, with your mum and dad. None that aren't tainted. He was a lying piece of shit, and that taints everything. Rachel is a sweeter, kinder, more accepting person than me. You can't stay angry forever. I'm not going to stay angry forever. After this week, I'm done with it. It goes on the market and I never have to see it again. Rachel wants to see the good in everyone, even in me. But some people are rotten, and your life is better off without them in it. After we kissed each other good night, I turned to switch off the light. The last thing I saw before it went dark was the ring sitting in the open matchbox. Dad claimed the ring had been passed down through his family through the generations. More likely he'd cheated some rich widow out of it. He used to claim he was descended from French nobility, and his family had come over to escape the revolutionaries. This was rather at odds with his whole rags to riches, poor kid, done good routine, but whatever lie was worth telling in any given moment. The ring was old, but I doubt it was that old. I did actually like the idea that the ring was an heirloom, because with this generation, I could bring my dad's lineage to an end. He was gone, maybe an accident, maybe suicide, I don't know. He'd taken some pills, had too much to drink, and his heart had given out. The stress of probably going to prison can do that to you. I wasn't going to have kids, and I was pretty sure Lillian must have been barren, or else she'd have had some, although she probably didn't feel successful without kids. Hard to claim she had it all without them. Maybe she could have had IVF. I don't know. Anyway, it was starting to look like my family's flawed, toxic genes weren't going to make it to another generation. I wasn't sorry about that at all. I slept like a log that night, so I wasn't feeling that guilty about taking the ring. I only woke up because Rachel was being noisy in the morning. She'd hung her coat on the back of the door and was beating the dust out of the shoulders. She apologised for waking me. "This place is so dusty," she said. She sat on the bed and leaned over to kiss me good morning. "I'm going to be walking around with half of your family clinging to my clothes." I really didn't like this morbid line of humour. "Let me know how things go," she said. "I will. And if you feel down, make sure you call me, yeah?" I already said I would. "But you don't always," she said quietly. "Let me know how you're getting on." She kissed me again and headed off. I dozed a little that morning, slipping back into a dream where I found myself at a noisy party and couldn't get any of the guests to leave. They just didn't seem to notice me. The first of the charity shop workers arrived at lunchtime, along with a small lorry. The two guys who got out looked a bit undersized for physical work, and too old to be carrying heavy things. One was a talker, the other was a bit strange. He stood bent forward, poking his chin out. He looked around a lot, but never actually looked at me. "So it's everything in bin bags that needs to go," said the talkative one. "All the bin bags, and there's a few cardboard boxes too." "Hear that, Mick? All the bin bags?" "All the bin bags, yes, Dave." "Was it your mum that died, love?" said Dave. I nodded. "Ah, that's a shame. It's tough when they go." "Yeah. Lost my mum about 10 years ago. Of course, she'd been ill for a long time, so it was a bit of a relief to tell the truth when she passed over." "This box too, Dave?" shouted his friend. "We taking these boxes as well, love?" "Yes, all those cardboard boxes." "All those cardboard boxes too, Mick?" "All the boxes. OK, Dave." "I can help lift things too," I said. "No, that's OK, love. You've been through enough." I felt like I had to do something. "What about a drink?" I asked. "Oh, I'd love a tea," he said. "You want a tea, Mick?" "Not with 2 sugars, Dave." There were only 2 mugs left in the kitchen. Both were chipped and stained and old. Not worth giving away. Almost everything else had been packed up. I found myself feeling sentimental about crockery I'd never see or use again. Items of kitchenware that had been with me my whole life. Things that had never been thrown away. Relationships that had lasted longer than most of my actual human relationships. I watched the guys as they got to carrying things out and loading up their lorry. I started to feel my heartbeat getting faster. I wondered if I should have kept more. Not for any real reason. I'd gone through and kept everything I actually wanted. But seeing them take her things away, things she'd treasured, now gathered up, boxed, and getting shipped off by strangers. I went into the living room and took a vase and some bookends out of a box. Things that I knew she liked a lot. I felt like I had to make up for some mistake I'd made, at least protect some pieces of her life. It was so silly, but I had to protect and keep some piece of her safe. I didn't even notice when the kettle boiled, and while I was making the tea I noticed that one of the two guys was coughing. I'd been lost in my thoughts again, and he'd been coughing for a while, coughing badly. I went to check and I saw that Mick was bent double, coughing his guts out. His mate Dave was bending over him, trying to make eye contact while he patted him on the back. "Where is it?" he shouted at him. Still coughing, Mick pointed to the window. "Oh, what'd you leave it out there for?" he cried, charging past me out the door. "Is he all right?" "Left his inhaler in the van," he cried, bounding into the front garden. Mick was steadying himself against the door. He looked like he might collapse. "Can I do something?" I said, not sure who I was saying it to. "Did you put it in the glove box?" Dave yelled from outside. Mick waved his arm in a way that made it seem like he was agreeing, so I shouted, "Yes!" A moment later, Dave was back, charging towards his friend with the inhaler held out. Mick grabbed it and Dave walked him past me to take him outside. It was very awkward for a few minutes while we all stood in the front garden waiting for him to get his breath back. "Will he be okay?" I asked, feeling helpless. "You doing all right, mate?" "Doing all right, Dave," he said chokingly. "It's all the dust," Dave said to me. "Gets to his lungs." The sort of comment Rachel might have made came straight to my mind, but I didn't say it out loud. I said they didn't have to carry on and that we could finish another day, but they were insistent. They didn't have the van tomorrow, and I didn't have the willpower to just tell them no. I felt a bit ashamed for not having that kind of personality. I should have insisted they stop. It's what Lillian would have done, as if she cared to. She wouldn't have been bothered if they lived or died, as long as she wasn't inconvenienced. I've always been more of my mother's daughter. That would have been a good thing, better than being more like Dad, but Mum was such a doormat for other people her whole life. If only I didn't feel like I was always standing on quicksand. I spent the rest of the time they were there wincing when Mick lifted a box and struggled. It was so uncomfortable. I tried to tip them when they left, but I couldn't even assert myself into making them take the money. I was so glad when they'd gone. It had taken under an hour to clear Mum's things out. After tomorrow there'd be almost nothing left. There was a bit of an echo now when I moved from one room to another. Houses look so much bigger when they're emptied out. Good for the estate agent's pictures, I suppose. The guys had been right about it being dusty. With the bags and boxes gone, I could see their outlines marked across the floors. I'd done my best in the weeks leading up to Mum's death to keep things clean, yet dust was still everywhere. Moving things around and packing things up had spread so much more of it around. I didn't feel like I had the energy for cleaning. I'm like that when I'm feeling low. I got out Mum's geriatric hoover, but that wasn't powerful enough to get up the dust. Knowing I would have to get out a mop and bucket sent my mood crashing to the floor. I wanted this to be over. And it was going to be all over. I just had to last for the next few days. I could struggle through it and then, in time, I would be able to enjoy the money. I did need the money. Although I wasn't sure if there was anything worthwhile I could do with it. It was a life-changing amount of money, but I'd probably just wasted on things. Things that would all end up in a skip or in a charity shop eventually. They all fade into dust in the end. We all just disintegrate into nothingness. I managed to go through with cleaning the floors, the whole time my echo acting like some kind of eerie accompaniment. I planned to do the windows that day too, but it was almost dark and the weather looked like it was going to turn, which it did at about 6 o'clock with a heavy downpour. I hadn't done much with my life so far. Drifted from one job to the next. Nothing had really stuck. I'd done English at university, which wasn't much good for anything. I had it in my head for a long time that I needed to do something to help humanity, perhaps to atone for the sins of my father, which I was already painfully aware of. The problem with that idea was that I didn't like humanity that much. I started training to be a teacher, then quit because I couldn't handle working with kids. I thought about being a social worker or a therapist for a bit too, but dealing with messy people all the time. I was a gardener for a few months. Thought I'd be happy creating something, but that was too much hard work and I got bored with it. The problem with my depression is that it makes everything seem like such a chore, and I ended up not being able to muster the effort. I get discouraged very quickly. Rachel would say I just needed more confidence. Maybe. I'm just not sure what I'm supposed to be good at. She says I'm smart and talented, but what is it I'm supposed to be smart about and talented at? It's nice to be called an amazing person, but I needed something to back that up, something I could put on a CV. I found myself eventually working at a publishing company. I'd started as a temp manning their front desk. Then they'd taken me on full-time. Gradually, I'd moved off the front desk and on to becoming an editorial assistant. It was good. I liked doing it. But they didn't really bat an eyelid when I had to take time off to look after Mum, and they kept letting me take time off as her health declined. But clearly, I wasn't an essential player making a vital contribution. I could make some choices with my life once the house was sold and I got the money. Make some decisions about what, if anything, I wanted from life. Just 2 more days and I could be out of here and start leaving it all behind me. Rachel phoned, but I didn't answer. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk to her, but sometimes I just don't want to talk at all, period. The problem with talking about my feelings is that Rachel will want to try and make it all better. Life is tough. Sometimes you're sad, and that's the way it is. You can't just say positive, nice things and make it better. Empty words don't really do anything. I'd have to speak to her eventually. I'd text to say I was in the middle of something, and I'd call her back, hoping I'd have time to think of something to say that could steer the conversation away from how I was doing. She called me again later despite what I'd asked. I bought fish and chips from the good fish and chip shop a little before. I was feeling so bloated when I started to speak. I pushed the conversation towards telling her what happened with the charity shop workers. Honestly, I thought he was going to keel over. But were they all right? Yeah, they sort of got right back to it afterwards. I guess they did make 'em tougher in the old days. It's your mum's revenge. Her dusty remains are finally standing up for herself. There was a bit of an awkward silence after that one. Sorry, she said. Even she could tell that was a bit harsh. It's okay, I said, letting her off again. I just meant, the awkwardness of her voice. It's just so weird when you think about it. Dust is like dead people, and we're always breathing it in or sweeping it up. It is very ghoulish, I said dryly. It's not all skin, it's all kinds of stuff anyway. Your mum was always lovely and kind. If only there were more people like her around. You said sorry already, I replied. Where are you? She changed the subject. I can hear lots of voices. Are you at the pub or something? No, I'm home on my own. You watching TV? No, they cut it off with the internet. But I can hear voices. Really? Yeah, it's like people are talking in the background. Like you're phoning close to a room full of people being noisy, and you've come to a quiet place to make the call. There's literally no one here but me, I said, looking around the room. Weird. Yeah. I weirdly found myself walking around from the living room to the dining room just to make sure. So everything's okay then? Sure, it's fine. And you feel good? I feel perfectly fine. I think I'm just going to go to bed early and read a book. Okay. Call me tomorrow to let me know how things go. I will, I said. She just wants to show she cares. It's a good thing, really. Before bed, I put on my big coat and stood in the front doorway, where there's some shelter, to have a smoke without getting rained on. I could have just smoked indoors, but Mum never liked it, so I didn't. Even though it was fucking cold. Rachel wasn't wrong, even though she shouldn't have joked about it. Mum couldn't stand up to anyone. All those times I complained about Lillian not doing anything, and she'd say nothing or make excuses for her. Be nice to your sister, sweetheart. She just does things in her own way. And then when she finally arrived, Mum would act so grateful, like it was some great big fucking effort. I wish I was different. I might have a good old bitch in private, fume and rant to Rachel, but when it comes down to it, don't really say much in my own defence either. I don't clap back when someone is rude to me or treats me badly. Rachel could take so much advantage of me if she wanted to. If it came down to it, would I be much more different than Mum? What would I overlook just to keep her in my otherwise aimless life? What might I have to do to keep her, if she finally gets tired of trying to make something out of me, if I'm just too sour and aimless to love? But that night, as I got ready for bed, I saw the ring by the bedside, and I thought to myself, at least I've done this. At least I've stood up for something, even if it was in a bit of a cowardly way. I didn't feel guilty for stealing it, not one bit. I was glad I'd done something to get back at Lillian and get something for myself. I slid it on my finger. Rachel was always saying I was stronger than I knew. What I wouldn't have given for a bit more confidence, some more bite. Something that wouldn't leave me feeling so tired and empty inside all the time. I could hear something. Was that a voice? I put down the ring and stepped into the hall. For just a second, I heard what I thought Rachel must have heard. The sound not just of a voice, but many voices. It was as if for a moment a door had opened, like a pub door, and suddenly all the noise from inside had spilled out before it had closed up again, trapping the noise back inside. I felt like I had to have a little look around just to make sure, and when I went downstairs, I found that the front door was open. It was open only just a little. I thought I must not have closed it properly. I could hear the sound of the rain outside. I pushed it too gently and snapped on the bolt to make doubly sure it was locked. I walked into the living room just to check I was alone, that no one could have slipped in. Each one of my footsteps carried an echo, and I could still hear even over the sound of the rain outside. There were a few pieces of furniture left, still places you could hide, if you wanted to. After a few minutes of looking around, I decided there seemed to be no one here except me. I checked the back door was locked. Then I went back upstairs. I couldn't hear those sounds of voices anymore. But I never settled that evening. I felt on edge, like there were people there, that the house wasn't empty despite all the evidence. I couldn't sleep because I didn't have the privacy to relax. It was as if someone was always just about to appear from around the corner, or through the door, or from behind the curtains. I actually propped up a chair against the door that night just to be sure. Then later, when I was struggling to sleep, I went up to the door, crouched down, and I listened. It's hard to remember now. Maybe I just dreamt that I did that. I don't think I heard anything. Maybe in a dream I would have. I walked downstairs the next morning, feeling like my head was full of gravel. It was quite sunny and the light was hurting my eyes, but it made the flooring in the living room look really bright. I could see that it was dusty all over again. How could that be when I'd literally been on my knees cleaning up just the day before? It wasn't just that, though. When I looked at the floor, I could see footprints in the dust. I thought at first they must be from me searching the rooms from the night before, yet as I stared at it, I saw that all the footprints, they were going in different directions, not forward in one trail. As I looked more closely, I thought they looked like they were different sizes and of different shoe prints. Then the front doorbell rang. The furniture charity shop workers were here, and I had to let them in even though I'd only just gotten up and looked a total mess. People who are always late get a bad reputation, but I swear to you, it's the people who are always early. They're the ones who are the real trouble. Two much less old men who looked in better shape for it arrived and started to grab the remaining furniture. I had planned to help them by bringing some things down from upstairs, but I wasn't in the mood for it, and frankly they shouldn't have surprised me before breakfast. I let them get on with it and had the first fag of the day. I didn't get too hormonal this time with the last of Mum's things going, perhaps because I was more psychologically prepared for it, although maybe because it was the personal effects that seemed to define her, which had already been moved out. Could also have been the fact that I was in a bad mood. I wanted for it to be all over so badly. After they'd gone, the volume of the echo was dialed up more. I could hear every footstep bounce from room to room. I looked down and, thanks to the charity guys, there really were countless footsteps across the floor. So whatever I thought I'd seen earlier, I couldn't tell now whether it had really been like that or I'd just made some mad mistake. I had some breakfast. Fried toast because there were no appliances now. I had to get the mop and the cloths back out to clean up the floor again. But it wasn't just the floor. Dust was back on the shelves, the window ledges and the mantelpiece. I couldn't understand it. There was only me here now. I knew I'd already cleaned these places. How could it still be everywhere? I decided to leave the rest for later. It might not show up in the estate agent's photos anyway. But the weather was okay, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to clean the windows at least. I'd been putting it off, and not just because of the weather, but because it would mean going up a ladder. I didn't like heights very much. I'd been lent one from Rachel's uncle, and it wasn't as scary as it might have been. It had these legs that extended out to the sides that helped me secure it against the ground. I extended it and carefully put the top end just under the upstairs small bedroom window. I pushed the feet into the grass and extended the side legs so they could rest on the solid ground of the patio. With my bucket and cloth at the ready, I checked again that it was firmly in place, and then, deep breath, I started to climb. Except that the bucket was too heavy, so I tipped most of it onto the grass and tried again. I climbed up slowly, and once I got to the top, I gave the window a few passes with my sponge, cleaning it with slow, careful strokes, and then I had to go back down again because I needed the squeegee and the dry towel. There had to be a better way of doing this. I thought about using a backpack, but I'd have been too afraid of reaching behind me and losing my balance. One window was done, which in itself was a relief. I went back down to reposition the ladder to clean the next one along. Bedroom window, where I was sleeping. I went up the ladder and sponged the window down. I had ingeniously stuffed the squeegee down my trousers. I slid the bucket down my arm and held the ladder with that hand, while I used the squeegee with the other. I reached up, put the rubber edge against the window, pulled it down, and behind the soapy water, I revealed a face. I should say the outline of a face. I could see a head and some shoulders, and some long hair draped over them. But there was no face, no eyes staring at me, but it was definitely looking at me. How could it not be? It startled me, which made me loosen my grip on the ladder. I overreacted then and threw my arms through the rungs. The squeegee fell to the ground. The bucket spilled soapy water all over me. It was uncomfortably pressed between my chest and the ladder. I looked back into the window. The blank face was still there, and as I watched, two new faces appeared, standing on either side, two more grey outlines peering out at me. I let the bucket drop, and with my heart racing wildly, I carefully took each step to the bottom of that ladder, slowly making my way down, and when I got there, I just collapsed, fell back on the lawn, breathing desperately, painfully. Letting some moments pass, I dared to sit back up and look up at the window. I couldn't see anything because of the glare from the sunlight, I didn't know what to do at that moment. I was too scared to go inside, but I had nowhere else I could go. There was no way to get in front of the house without going through it. I stuck my head through the open patio door and shouted, "Who's there? What do you want?" I couldn't hear any answer, and after about 10 minutes of freaking out and not knowing what to do, I decided to walk very quietly back in. Something very strange was going on here. The floor was still dusty. I didn't know how that could possibly be. I went to the bottom of the stairs and looked up. I could just go walk out the door and leave, but I couldn't really leave without my phone, and it was charging in my room. "Hello?" I shouted up. No answer, except for that awful echo. I needed my phone, or how else could I get someone to come and pick me up? I walked slowly up the stairs, with the sound of each creaking step carrying. I arrived at the top and looked across the landing. I could see straight into that room where the figures had stood, and it was empty. I could see clouds of dust hanging in the air. I could see the soapy water still on the window outside, but not the figures I knew I'd seen, was absolutely sure I had not imagined. I went and sat on the end of my bed, trembling, not knowing what to do. What can you do when you start seeing things and hearing things? Call up a hospital and ask them to get a straitjacket ready. The bed sheets were covered in dust now. So was my phone. It started to ring. I could barely see the screen's light through the layer of grey. It was Rachel. She could tell by my tone that something was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked. I hardly knew how to say it. "I think I saw someone." "What?" "I think I saw someone in the house, but I'm not sure. I can't find them. There's dust everywhere." I tried to tell her everything, but the more I tried, the more stupid and crazy I sounded. "If you say it, I believe you," she said. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. Maybe I'm imagining it all. It's really confusing." I was crying now, for God's sake. "I think you should just go. Let me come pick you up from somewhere." "Oh, but it's probably nothing. It doesn't make sense. I'm probably working myself up over nothing, going off the fucking deep end." "If you don't feel safe, you should leave. Call an Uber. Go to somewhere and I can drive up after work and get you." "No, I don't want you to do that. I'm being silly." "You're not being silly. Trust yourself." I looked around, down the hall, across the landing. There was so much dust in the air. "I just want to get it finished." I felt a prickle in my throat. "If I can just make it through the night, I'll be done tomorrow." "You don't have to. You don't have to put yourself through this." "I want to just—" I was coughing. There was all the dust. The air was thick with it. "I'm coming over." "I don't want you to be put out." "God damn it, you're not my burden. I want to be there for you." I could hardly speak. "Are you all right?" she cried. I held the phone away from my mouth. I didn't want her to hear me making such a noise. "I'm coming over there, and that's final." I tried to answer, but I couldn't. I was struggling to breathe. "Please say something, Josie." I stood and felt intensely lightheaded. I fell down, landed on my knees. The phone slipped from my fingers. I wanted to get up, but I felt too dizzy. I could hear Rachel shouting for me. I heard footsteps. I looked down the hall and I saw the figures, more grey outlines marching up the stairs. I gasped. I felt dust coat the back of my throat. I started to retch, started to choke. And like a flash, it all went dark. I passed out. It happened somewhere near the end. Mum would go through these spells of complete confusion. She didn't understand where she was or what was going on. She'd get distressed and I'd have to try and calm her down. when it was really bad and it got really bad. She wasn't even sure who I was. She literally didn't recognize me. When I said I was her daughter, she said her daughter was just a child. One of those times she lashed out and scratched the side of my face when I was trying to help her into bed. I was shocked and hurt. Not just physically, it was kind of traumatic. I was sat on the end of the bed crying. Mum had seemed to bury herself in the sheets after. I thought she might have just drifted back to sleep. She'd been so quiet, but slowly I became aware that she was crying too. She cried out and said, "Oh God, it's all been a mistake. It's all gone wrong. I got everything so wrong." Mum was such a shrinking violet, and she was so weak in those final days. It was so unusual for her to raise her voice and speak like that. "I've let everybody down." She was hitting her head back against the pillow. "I let you all down." "No, Mum," I cried. "You haven't. I should have done better. I should have done more to protect you. I just wanted things to be all right, how I always wanted them to be. I wanted to have my family and for it to be all perfect. And I'm sorry it went wrong. I'm sorry, Josie." She was bawling. I was bawling too. "Mum, no," I said, hurrying to the top of the bed. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I let everybody down. Stop saying that. I wish I could put everything right. If I had just one wish, if I could have anything, I would try to put it all right." I lay in bed with her that night. She cried herself to sleep like a child. But then the next morning, she seemed to have forgotten all about it. We went on like normal, as if she'd never said a word. I awoke coughing, spitting out clumps of dust like a cat coughing up hairballs. The sound of footsteps, thousands of footsteps. I could feel them vibrate across the floorboards. The floor was caked in dust. There was dust in my eyes. I was covered in it, my skin and clothes completely coated. When I sat up, I left a body-shaped outline on the floor. It was thick in the air. It was everywhere. There were so many figures. The room was packed with their strange outlines. Aimlessly they wandered, walking across each other, through each other. One outline morphing into the next and then passing through and into the next outline. The whispering, the incessant sound of their talking, it was all I could hear, this endless, ceaseless, unfathomable chatter. I wasn't sure if they could see me. They all seemed lost and confused. But then one of the shapes seemed to walk up to me and stare me right in the face. The whispers got louder. It was like 1,000 snakes hissing at once. I pushed through the blank staring outline and through a dozen others as I made for the shape of the door and felt my way through. I was coughing again. I could barely see anything. The dust was in my eyes, blurring my vision and making them water. It was like finding your way through the densest fog. I felt the floor disappear beneath me. I'd walked right over the stairs. I managed to grab the handrail and stop myself from falling too hard. I landed on my side halfway down and slid to the bottom, landing on my knees. I twisted my ankle bad, but I couldn't think about that. I was finding it so hard to breathe. I had to get outside, but I could feel them. The dust-covered figures, they were gathering around me, staring down at me. I got myself awkwardly onto my feet. They seemed to drift closer. I wanted to run through the crowd to the front door, but I could barely stand, limping and feeling the way ahead. I moved through the clouds of staring people. I crashed into the back door and slammed my hand down on the handle. I shoved my way through and fell down on the patio. Propped up on my hands and feet, I coughed and coughed and coughed. Slowly I tried my best to bring clean air into my lungs. Then I lay down on the ground. There were tears in my eyes. I was just shaking, trying to breathe steadily, take in the air. I could hear the voices in the background like an enormous swell, a rising and falling sound, waves of agitated noise. I could still hear no words, but the sound made me sense confusion, anger, frustration. Don't ask me how I knew, I just felt it. I noticed that there was someone standing over me. I could see their feet. Their outline was so much stronger. And as my eyes watered and the dust washed out, I realized that I recognized those shoes, and those tights, and those ankles. A voice so familiar, so soothing said to me, "Sweetheart, you must bring this to an end." I was too scared to even look up, never mind speak. "Tell them you'll give it back," she said. "They'll go, they'll leave you alone." I raised myself up into a crawling position, and I looked behind me, through the back doors and the back windows. Through all the upstairs windows, too, I could see hundreds of figures staring at me. "Tell them, sweetheart. Tell them you'll give it back. Then it can all be over." With tears running down my face and my voice trembling, I said, "I'll give it back." I took a deep breath, put myself into a seated position, closed my eyes and screamed, "I'll give it back! Whatever you want, I'll give it back!" The hissing whispers got louder. I found it hard to listen. I opened my eyes. The outline of my mother was gone. The whispers grew higher in pitch, becoming more tense. And when I looked back once more, I saw them all suddenly collapse. A cloud of powder drifted to the floor, and like a tornado, the masses of dusty remains rushed out the back door like smoke billowing from a chimney, only so much faster. The cloud blew over me. I covered my ears to protect my head from their shrieking sound. I was kicking and screaming when Rachel found me. I was freezing cold. I'd been out there for hours. It was the day after the day Mum died, and I thought I was all cried out. But when her nurse handed me the ring, which she'd uncovered from somewhere, I started all over again. I felt embarrassed and ashamed, and her telling me I shouldn't didn't really help. I was trying to explain that I wasn't crying because my mum had died. I was crying because of the fucking injustice of it all. Mum's pathetic life, Lillian's callousness, the fucking ring. I did everything to look after her, while Lillian, who did nothing and didn't care, she took advantage and made her promise to give her the ring. And Mum just let her walk all over her again, like she let everyone walk all over her. But your mother was brave. Brave! My mother? Your mother stared death in the face. She stayed strong right until the end. Believe me, I've looked after other people who have been dying. Your mother was one of the most calm and composed out of all of them. She went through one of the hardest things anyone can go through. She was good at pretending everything was all right, I said, harshly, bitterly. She was good at denying any truth that was right in front of her. She was a good woman, she began, and she drew strength from you. She reached across the table and put her hand on mine. She wasn't strong enough to stand up to Lillian, I said, churlishly, just to contradict her. The nurse squeezed my hand. There is nothing your mother wouldn't have done for you. You stayed with her right until the end. That was brave. That took courage. Courage your sister could never understand. It's so fucking unfair, all of it. She didn't deserve to die like this, to have such terrible people in her life. I know, she said. Life isn't fair. But do you know what I believe? I knew she was going to say it before she said it. I had only seconds to brace myself. I believe that everything happens for a reason. All I wanted to do was scream. It was just over a week after I left the house. I was sitting across from Lillian in the beer garden of a Toby Carvery. She was trying on the ring. It's just as beautiful as I remember, she said, inspecting it at arm's length. She looked at her husband, who was on his phone. Realizing she was expecting him to say something, he looked up and said, "Yeah, looks nice," and then went back to his screen. "Did you find anything else down there?" she asked. I told her that I'd found it under a loose floorboard. She wanted to know if I'd found any other valuables. "No, just that," I said. "So strange you only just found it right now." I couldn't tell if she was being suspicious or not. I'd done well given it to her, hadn't I? Or did it matter now? Did they ever call back with another offer? "No," I answered. "That's a shame. We can get a better price for it than that." She stood up. "Are you all right? You're even less talkative than normal." "I'm fine." "Is it the leg?" I had a small fracture at the top of my tibia. "I'm not in pain or anything. It'll be okay soon. I have to go to the bathroom and then head off. All my best to Rachel." Rachel was actually waiting for me inside. I hobbled over there on my crutches and sat down opposite her in a booth by the window. She got right up and walked over to my side, then put her arm around me. "You're doing the right thing," she said, putting her head on my shoulder. Fuck the right thing, I thought, but kept it to myself. I wondered if Rachel thought I was mad. And I wasn't sure that she'd be wrong. The whole story made more sense if I had some kind of breakdown. I'd been angry for weeks. I watched her and her stupid empty suit husband through the window as they walked to their car. I felt like I'd never win against them, that the whole world was balanced in favour of the most awful, selfish people, and that the rest of us were doomed to live with our self-pity and shame. The liars and cheats and selfish scumbags always end up on top. But as she was about to get inside that car, I saw her husband stop her. She stood up straight as he ran his hands across her shoulders, brushing something off. He started to do it harder. I realised he was trying to beat the dust out of her coat. I sat up suddenly, giving Rachel a start. I slid closer to the window, putting my face right up to the glass. They'd both gotten into the car, and I watched as it pulled out of the car park and drove towards the exit, bringing them closer to the window. As they came past, I saw behind them, sitting in the back seat, a grey outline of a figure. It seemed to have long hair but no face. I saw it turn and look at me as the car drove by and onto the main road. It turned out that I'd misunderstood what Mum had said to me. She said I had to bring it all to an end, and that if I gave it back it would all be over. It took a few days, but finally I understood. Mum had done what she'd wanted. She'd put things right, and she'd set me free. I always used to joke that Lillian would choke to death on her own bullshit one day. I was nearly right. And I didn't feel any guilt. Not any guilt at all. Thank you for listening to the New Ghost Stories podcast. If you've enjoyed the podcast and want to support what I do, please like, comment or leave a review on any platform and subscribe to hear future releases. You can also support the show by becoming a patron and visiting patreon.com/newghoststories. The show is written and produced by me, David Paul Nixon. If you'd like to read more from me, visit my Substack, newghoststories.substack.com. And you can also find me on Instagram, Threads, Mastodon, Facebook, and the website formerly known as Twitter, @NewGhostStories. Next time on the New Ghost Stories podcast, they really are out to get you, and they're already in your home.